This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about a system quietly and powerfully failing. Somewhere, deep inside a regime that claims to govern in the name of faith, a shift has happened, one that goes unnoticed until it can no longer be ignored. People, for the first time in decades, are breaking their silence, demanding something more than just survival. But don't mistake this for a sudden outburst. This has been brewing for years. Years of suffocating economic collapse. Years of escalating authoritarian rule. Years of promises made and promises broken. And now, the price of that failure is not measured in dollars or rials, it's measured in lives. And yet, there's no turning back. The damage has been done. If you think this is just another protest, think again. You won't want to miss what happens next. Stay with me. What controls a system like this? It's not just one man. It's not a single policy. It's something much larger, much deeper, and far more dangerous. This isn't a government in crisis. This is a regime that has perfected the art of control, a system built on fear, manipulation, and misdirection. It's a machine designed not to serve the people, but to preserve itself at any cost. The Iranian regime has long understood the delicate balance between oppression and survival. And now, as protests erupt from Tehran's Grand Bazaar to the countryside, it's clear the machinery of control is cracking. But it's not the people's anger that threatens the system most. It's the moment the rest of the world notices. This isn't just about the people of Iran anymore. This is a geopolitical powder keg waiting to explode. The world has been silent too long, but that silence is about to break. Before, the regime's control was absolute. People were compliant, silent, for the most part. But something has changed, something insidious, something slow. The system didn't break overnight. No, it shifted gradually. And that's what makes this so dangerous. In a country where the ruling elite cloaked themselves in religious legitimacy, where control was maintained by the promise of stability, what happens when that stability evaporates? It's not the explosive uprisings that are most dangerous. It's the slow collapse of trust, the gradual unraveling of everything the regime once promised. It's in the quiet moments, the loss of faith in the currency, the collapse of local markets, the rise in hunger that no amount of propaganda can mask. This isn't a revolution born from a single spark. It's the result of years of quiet suffering, years of systemic neglect. And now, those who once kept their heads down have risen up. And this time, they won't be ignored. The first cracks in the system, they came quietly. At first, it was just whispers. Then, it was the first strike in the Grand Bazaar of Tehran. A handful of shopkeepers decided they'd had enough. They closed their stores in protest. It wasn't big, it wasn't loud, it was a ripple. But ripples, when they spread, can become waves. By the time the first shops closed, the regime saw it as a nuisance. It was a sign. The economy was already on the brink. Inflation was spiraling out of control. The Iranian rial had already hit rock bottom. People were no longer willing to tolerate the unimaginable. The very currency they depended on was worthless. And the government, it did nothing but defend its own power. Soon, it wasn't just the markets in Tehran. It was spreading across the country to the farthest reaches. And that quiet protest, it was now an unstoppable force. But the regime still didn't get it. They thought they could shut it down with force. They were wrong. It's easy to blame the protesters. It's easy to point fingers at the chaos, at the violence. But the real question is, who benefits from all of this? Who benefits when the regime holds on to power by force? Who profits when an entire population is kept in the dark, desperate, and silenced? The answer lies not in the headlines, but in the shadows. In Iran, it's not the people who hold the power. It's a small elite connected to the heart of the regime. The ones who thrive on repression, the ones whose wealth is built on the suffering of the masses. The military, the security apparatus, the religious leaders, they all stand to gain from this chaos. Every time the regime cracks down, they reinforce their own power. Every time they silence dissent, they tighten their grip. Meanwhile, the people, they pay the price. Rising inflation, rampant unemployment, collapsing currency, it's all part of the system. And the worse it gets, the more control the regime has. It's not just about staying in power. It's about keeping the system running, a system that rewards the few while crushing the many. And that system, it's broken, but those who benefit aren't letting it break. The government thought it could handle the situation, a few arrests, a few threats. But then something happened that they didn't expect. The protests grew faster, bigger, more determined. The regime's attempts at containment, the crackdowns, the arrests, the violence only made it worse. People weren't afraid anymore. The longer they went without food, without hope, the more they had to lose. And when desperation turns to defiance, even the most oppressive regime can't control the tide. It spread to every corner of the country, rural, urban, rich, poor. It didn't matter. The regime's promise of stability, of control, was a lie. And that lie, it was being exposed in real time. The government's response was simple: crush them. But the more they crushed, the more the world watched. The internet shut down. The deaths stacked up. The international community, once silent, was now on edge. What started as a local crisis was beginning to look like something much more dangerous, a direct challenge to the global order. And now the world has to ask, how far is too far? You might think this is just a political crisis. You might think this is about leaders, about geopolitics. But this isn't just about governments. This is about people, real people. Imagine the desperation, the fear, the hunger. Thousands of lives are caught in the middle of this fight. The people of Iran are no longer just protesting for a change in leadership. They're protesting for survival. In the streets of Tehran, in the farthest reaches of the country, mothers are crying out for their children. Fathers are watching their families starve while their government squabbles over power. Every day, the streets echo with the cries of the suffering, the hungry, the oppressed. And the regime, it doesn't see them. The government's response is simple: more force, more repression, more lies. But the people have had enough. They've been pushed to the edge, and now they're fighting back. Not just for political freedoms, but for their dignity, for their lives. This is no longer just about a revolution. This is about life and death. What happens in Iran doesn't stay in Iran. It never does. This isn't just a regional crisis. It's a global one, a ripple effect that's already reaching far beyond the streets of Tehran. When a regime like this falters, it sends shockwaves through the entire geopolitical landscape. For years, Iran has been a critical piece in the puzzle of the Middle East. It's a hub of influence, a military power, and a key player in regional politics. But as the regime weakens, every neighboring country is forced to take notice. Israel, Saudi Arabia, Russia, all are watching closely, calculating their next moves. The possibility of a power vacuum in Iran, that's a dangerous prospect. And then there's the US. It's already involved, though it pretends to stay out of sight. The Trump administration, with its own interests, has made its position clear: military intervention could be on the table. But all these global players have one thing in common. They don't want stability in Iran. They want control. And that control, it's slipping away. Where does this all lead? What happens next? It's not simple. It's not clear. But there are three potential futures. Asterisk, asterisk. First, adjustment. Asterisk, asterisk. The system could adjust, make concessions, open a dialogue, try to appease the people. But history tells us this isn't likely. A regime this entrenched doesn't give up its grip easily. The people may receive some temporary relief, but the machinery of power will still run quietly beneath the surface. And nothing will truly change. Second, erosion. The pressure could continue to mount, slowly eroding the foundation of the regime. The protests will keep spreading, cracks will deepen, and the international community may intervene. The regime may not collapse immediately, but it will grow weaker. It might stagger on, but without the strength it once had, a slow, agonizing death for a system that has ruled for decades. Asterisk, asterisk. Third, rupture. Asterisk, asterisk. The system could break entirely. A sudden rupture, a full collapse where no one can predict what happens next. The power vacuum could be catastrophic. A rapid shift, a chaotic reordering of power, a region plunged into chaos. What happens in Iran could spiral beyond control. The world won't be able to ignore it anymore. And that's the real question. Which of these futures will we see? The truth is, we don't know what will happen next. We can't predict the outcome, but what's clear is this. The regime's grip on power is slipping. The protests aren't going away, and the world is watching. There's no easy answer, no comforting resolution, but the danger is real, and it's growing. The people of Iran are no longer just fighting for political freedom. They're fighting for survival, for dignity, for their very lives. The system is broken, but the question remains, will it break on its own, or will outside forces push it over the edge? How much longer can the world afford to ignore this? How much longer can the regime afford to ignore its people? The answers aren't clear, but one thing is certain. This is just the beginning. If you want to understand what happens next, if you want to follow this story as it unfolds, subscribe, stay with us. The fight for Iran's future isn't over yet, and the consequences will ripple far beyond its borders.